We have just learned about the median voter theorem in a committee or a parliamentary assembly or the US Senate, and how it allows the median voter to get exactly what they want. And we sort of relied, of course, on this bargaining and making new proposals, right? But apart from this committee version of the median voter theorem, we can also apply the logic of the median voter theorem to mass general elections. And the spatial model of party competition in mass elections goes back to Anthony Downs' 1957 book, An Economic Theory of Democracy. And while this case that we'll present here is limited to 2 parties and 1 issue dimension, the general idea of spatial party competition is one of the workhorse models in political science, and you will find it sort of implicitly or explicitly everywhere. Okay, so how does it work? Well, I've lined up some voters here, and I've lined them up based on ideological position, based on ideological preferences, from the leftmost to the rightmost voter. And I've highlighted the median voter, so we know. And the median voter, remember, it is the person who splits the group in half. There's exactly as many voters to the left as there are to the right. Okay. And these voters will vote for parties. Based on what? Well, based only on distance in this ideological dimension, right? They don't care if the candidate is prettier than the other one, or if they think he's more competent, or she's, I don't know, a better negotiator or something. So voters only vote based on ideology, based on policy distance from the party. And we have 2 parties, Democrats and Republicans, for example, and let's say they are sort of positioned sort of at the extremes. What happens then? Well, parties want to get votes. We can usually assume that parties are what we call office-seeking parties. So they want to win the election. Of course, parties have other motivations. They want to implement certain policy. So the party members or party leadership has ideological predispositions themselves. But of course, office is the precondition for implementing any kind of policy. Without winning office, no, your policy will not get implemented. So in order to win, they have to make compromises in terms of their ideological position. So what can the parties do? So if they are positioned like this, basically they maybe split the electorate in half, kind of, sort of. I didn't put it exactly there, maybe. But what can we do? Well, basically, these parties, of course, have an incentive to move to the center. So if the Republicans, in this case, move further to the middle, what happens? Well, if the election takes place and voters only vote based on distance alone, then all these voters on the right will vote for the Republicans, and all these voters on the left will vote for the Democrats, up to the point of the voter who is just sort of indifferent between the 2. But in this case, of course, the Republicans would win a large majority. What is the response of the Democrats to this? Well, they can also move to the center, of course. So they compromise on their policy positions a little bit in order to avoid the Republicans winning, and in order to actually implement those policies. So they make some concessions, move to the center a little bit. And what happens now? Well, now the election goes the other way. The Democrats would win. Now, what is would be the response of the Republicans? Well, the Republicans can go even closer to the center. And what happens then? Well, they would win again. And of course, in the end, what can the Democrats do? Well, the Democrats can do the same thing what the Republicans did, and locate themselves basically exactly at the position of the median voter. So basically, the prediction is that they move closer and closer to the center, offer policy choices or ideology that is closer and closer to the center in a way. And what happens once they've located themselves at the median voter? Well, basically, the same logic as before applies. The median voter's policy position is a Nash equilibrium policy position for the parties. How do we know this? Well, we can verify it. We can think about what if we as the Democrats or the Republicans, what if we move away to the left or to the right of the median voter? Well, obviously you would lose. right? So the only position that is not immediately defeated is exactly at the median voter's ideal point. What is the outcome? Well, the outcome is basically a coin toss. So whatever the median voter decides is the outcome, and other factors will play a role, maybe error, or how attractive the candidates are. So locating yourself at the median voter's ideal point is a Nash equilibrium in two-party elections in a one-dimensional space. And let that sink in for a second. So basically, the prediction of the Downsian model with two parties, one issue space, everybody votes, and so forth, is that parties in a two-party system, for example, in the US system, would offer identical policy options. They would essentially be indistinguishable based on policy. Interesting. Now, in reality, of course, the exact location of the median voter is unknown, right? Even excellent polling will not give you the exact location of the median voter, and of course, voters' motivations are more complex. But in the model, that is the prediction. And I think the takeaway point is not necessarily the like you locate yourself exactly at the median voter position, but the centripetal force, the force that pulls things together, like gravitational pull, if you want, of the median voter in two-party systems. So to recap, the median voter theorem in the mass election version, the Downsian model of spatial competition, essentially uses the following assumptions. There's only one ideological dimension. There are two office-seeking parties. Voters have single peak preferences over this ideological dimension, and they vote only based on distance, and there's no abstention. Okay, so we made a few simplifying assumptions that we know are wrong, of course. Reality is more complex, and we can think about modifying these assumptions, but we've made some simple assumptions, and taken together with the sort of process, the model generates some very crisp sort of predictions. It predicts convergence to the median voter's ideal point, or at least some sort of centripetal force. And so in a way, this of course explains why in many two-party systems there's some pressure to converge to the center. Sort of extremist candidates don't tend to do particularly well in elections in two-party systems, or do they? Of course, this is a model, so the actual assumptions matter. So you can think, of course, about modifying some of these assumptions. In many countries, there's not just one ideological dimension that matters, maybe. And maybe there are more than two parties, and maybe voters' preferences look different, or people abstain for some reason. So we can modify these assumptions, of course, and that in some cases leads to the same conclusions, or it leads to different conclusions. So we can interrogate the model in a way. And that's, I think, what we'll do next. In preparation for Thursday's seminar, I would like you to think a little bit about something. So we've just learned that in a two-party system like the United States, the median voter theorem predicts perfect convergence to the center. But I don't think we need fancy statistical techniques to know that in this case, empirically, Democrats and Republicans, at least in the last few elections, do not offer identical policy platforms. So they didn't offer identical policy choices. The policy trajectory of the United States is going to look quite different under Biden than what it would have been under Trump presidency. So clearly, something about the Downsian spatial model is off. So think about why this might be the case. So why don't they behave as Downs predicts? Why don't the parties converge to the median voter prediction in this case? I want you to come up with at least one possible reason, so we can discuss in the seminar. Another way to think about it, I guess, is sort of what would you want to modify about the Downsian spatial model? So we've talked about all these assumptions that we're making, and which of these assumptions would you change, and what do you think would happen if we do that?